friends. This is another episode of Empire of Lies, where we discuss manipulation and disinformation in Russian media. When propaganda confuses a bear with a tiger, Russian television increasingly resembles not a media outlet, but a weapon of information warfare. The new episode of 60 Minutes with Olga Skabeeva is a clear example of this. From the very first minutes, viewers are greeted not by analysis or facts, but by a deliberate metaphor. Russia is not a paper tiger bear, and there are no paper bears. The message is simple. Moscow is strong, and Western threats are laughable. But precisely in this deliberate bravado lies confusion. The Kremlin is increasingly forced to prove that it is still strong. Trump, Ukraine, and the transfer of war to Europe. The main topic of the episode is Donald Trump's speech at the UN General Assembly. Propaganda presents his words as a scandal. The US president allegedly declared 3 times that Ukraine is capable of reclaiming its territories, but then shifted all responsibility to Europe. For Russian viewers, this sounds like a mockery. America is stepping aside, while Europeans are being asked to die for Kyiv. However, in reality, Trump's words are far more pragmatic. He demonstrates that it is Europe that must strengthen its own defense and independence from Russian energy. But Skabeeva turns this into a betrayal of allies and a signal that the West is washing its hands of the situation. Thus, propaganda simultaneously plays on 2 emotions. Domestic viewers are instilled with joy. America is abandoning Ukraine. While ordinary Europeans are supposed to be instilled with doubt, you're being abandoned. Why should you continue to fight? Intertwining fact and farce. The program deliberately mixes real statements by Western leaders with ridicule of the details. Thus, the serious question of security guarantees is transformed into a mockery of Zelensky's accent or his skiing slip. And the diplomatic protocol between the US First Lady and Olena Zelenska is presented as a juicy story, to devalue the very topic of international support for Ukraine. This is a classic ploy to distract from the essence. Kyiv's support remains steadfast, and focus the viewer on trivialities that provoke laughter or irritation. Europe as the primary addressee. It's noteworthy that the entire episode plays not so much for the domestic audience as against Europe. Skabeeva ironically quotes Ursula von der Leyen's words about completely abandoning Russian energy by 2027. Replace dependence on cheap gas with expensive American gas. For Europeans, this must sound like a direct accusation. You're digging your own grave. But the reality is different. It was precisely thanks to the diversification of supplies that Europe survived Moscow's energy blackmail and maintained its unity. What is presented on air as a catastrophe actually became proof of the EU's resilience. Military reports, theatre of victory. The second half of the program devolves into the usual series of victory reports. Kupiansk is declared almost liberated. Ukrainian troops are surrounded. 700 militants are encircled. Meanwhile, Ukrainian sources, which are briefly shown, are acknowledged only as a telethon of difficult circumstances. The picture is clear. Russian viewers are presented with the inevitable success of the army, and the war itself is presented as a game of chess, where Moscow's moves are always precise. For Europe, however, this is a signal. Resistance is futile. Russia is winning. This is not a report from the front, but a tool for pressuring Western public opinion. Hello, dear friends and comrades. Your favorite program, 60 Minutes, is live, hot on the heels. Russia is not a paper tiger or bear, and there are no paper bears. This is how the Kremlin responded this morning to Trump's absolutely scandalous statement at the UN. The US president threatened to destroy the Russian economy and at least 3 times suggested that the Kyiv regime could turn the tide of the war and recapture lost territories. During his meetings with Zelensky, with Macron and on his social media accounts. Trump proposed that the Ukrainian armed forces do this, recapturing the territories with the help of the European Union. The United States itself will no longer spend money on the war. As usual, the US president complained that his very good relationship with Putin prevented the war from ending. When asked whether he continues to trust the Russian president, Trump promised to answer soon. Watch our report, Mr. President. Is there any news about your talks with President Putin? And do you still trust him? I'll report back in about a month. By declaring that there's no end in sight to the Ukrainian war, US President Donald Trump is giving Zelensky the go-ahead to wage war to the last Ukrainian. Having familiarized myself with and fully understood the military and economic situation between Ukraine and Russia, and having seen the economic hardships this is causing Russia, I believe that Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is capable of fighting and winning. Return all of Ukraine to its original state, with time, patience and financial support from Europe, and especially NATO. The return of the original borders where this war began is entirely possible. Why not? So, Trump is officially wishing Ukraine luck and washing his hands of the matter. The Kremlin's political calculations. It is important to understand, such broadcasts are not random. Their goal is to simultaneously mobilize the population within Russia and instill weariness in Europe. Everything concerning Trump, Orban, and the Italian foreign minister lines up. The West is divided, America is leaving, Europe is doomed to pay. But behind this propaganda noise lies the obvious. Moscow itself admits that it is dependent on the decisions of Washington and Brussels. If Russia were truly winning, there would be no need to spend hours proving that there are no paper bears. Conclusion: from paper bear to empty words. The December 24th episode of 60 Minutes is not a news program, but a performance. Its script is simple: humiliate Ukraine, sow doubt in Europe, and expose American policy as inconsistent. This was the program Empire of Lies. See you soon.